Ladies and gentlemen, can I ask that we start settling down so that we can start? We are due to start with our program at exactly 6 o'clock, and I do not wish to be late. All right, ladies and gentlemen, may I please have your attention? The time on my watch is exactly 6 o'clock. Ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening to all of you. I would like to take this time to welcome you all to this wonderful occasion where we are experiencing the launch of the long-awaited book titled Faces and Phases of Resilience, a memoir of a special kind, a book that has been penned by the globally acclaimed Professor Tinyiko Maluleke, who is the Vice-Chancellor and Principal of the Tshwane University of Technology. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you all to this wonderful event. My name is Dr. Sfiso Mnisi, and I will be your host this evening. We can clap. It is a wonderful day. It is such an honor to have you all here this evening. I want to take this time to greet the support structure of Professor Tinyiko Maluleke, his family, everyone that has been with the Prof from day one to this day where we are here to celebrate this amazing milestone. I would say to the family of Professor Maluleke, welcome to the University of Johannesburg. I also wish to take this time to greet and also welcome the staff that are here to support this event from the Tshwane University of Technology. I want to say, make sure that you feel at home at the great University of Johannesburg. Let us welcome our TUT counterparts with a big round of applause. Today is indeed a wonderful day. And of course, we are going to hear more about the book itself. But of course, even if I welcome all of you and wash your feet and give you water to drink, you will not feel welcomed until the father of the great University of Johannesburg does the welcoming. So, ladies and gentlemen, okay. Give me, I need to introduce the father of the great University of Johannesburg properly. Give me a second. So, the father of the great University of Johannesburg is none other than Professor Litlokwa George Mpedi. Now let me tell you more. I'm not done. So, in case you do not know who Professor Mpedi is, Professor Litlokwa George Mpedi is the Vice-Chancellor and Principal of the University of Johannesburg. He holds a B. Juris and LLB from Vista University, an LLM and LLD from the University of Johannesburg, and has completed executive programs at Oxford and Harvard University. He is a renowned scholar in labor and social security law. Prof. Mpedi has published widely, including Labor Law in Ghana, this is 2022, and another book which was published in 2023 titled From the Baobab to the Mosquito. And the recently published book in the year 2024 titled Artificial Intelligence and the Law. He is an NRF-rated researcher, B3, member of the Academy of Science of South Africa, and has received numerous accolades, including a Congressional Gold Medal and a Lifetime Achievement Award for Leadership in Tertiary Education in Africa. In November 2023, he he was honored with a chieftaincy in the Abedzi Kingdom in Ghana. He is also a visiting professor in Ghana and in Canada, and serves on several academic and professional boards locally and internationally. In May 2025, he was appointed to the Executive Committee of Universitas 2021. A big round of applause to Professor George Mbedi. But as Prof is making his way, and I was reading this book, and I discovered that from the Karate Kid to Vice-Chancellor, if you did not know, Professor Mbedi is also a Karate Kid. Hence the order at UJ. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Professor Litlokwa Mbedi to the stage.
Dr. Mnisi, thank you so much, Dr. Sfiso. Karate Kid no more, gone is my youth. Prof. Tinyiko Maluleke and family, distinguished guests. I mean, I saw so many amazing people, and I thought once I start mentioning people by name, you make a mistake of omitting people, then you are in trouble. And this is the part that I always mess up. So please allow me to say distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues, but please allow me to single out our publisher, Prof. Maluleke. Tracy McDonald of Tracy McDonald Publishing. Thank you so much for your support, your patience. I mean, it's not easy publishing vice-chancellors because we are full of excuses, but you are patient, and I have to acknowledge you. Thank you so much. Let me also acknowledge the people that are joining us virtually, because you may think this is it. No, but there are colleagues that are joining us virtually. Please also allow me to acknowledge our colleague, Emeritus Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Academic, Emeritus Executive Dean, Faculty of Education, Professor Sarah Gravet. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for setting time aside to be with us. Me, Barbara Masikela, our alumnus. Hey, if I start with this, I'm in trouble. Dr. Koza, it's so good to see you. The last time we chatted, we were talking about farming. I felt so inspired. So my next phase is to become a farmer, and you inspired me. So everyone, please feel welcomed here at the great University of Johannesburg. I mean, Prof. Michael Rudolph, I should stop. Everyone, please feel very welcomed here at the great University of Johannesburg. It's not about me. It's about honoring and celebrating and spending this evening with Professor Maluleke. Ladies and gentlemen, when I was introduced, I felt so special. Thanks, Doctor. I felt like a boxer, you know, the boxer being introduced to come step into the ring. Ladies and gentlemen, this is just an amazing opportunity for us as a great University of Johannesburg to celebrate. Colleagues, allow me to say it, I feel so emotional. A selfless man. In academia, we are full of people who, suffer from the PhD syndrome. Pull him down, destroy him, jealousy and all that. But Professor Maluleke is not one of those. It's my mentor. It's the colleague that I call when, as Vice-Chancellor, I need to bounce ideas. It's somebody that is always prepared to open the door for me as a young academic, and also many other people. I mean, I read the book, Prof, but there are other people who will talk more about it. But please allow me, I mean, when you talk about faces and faces of resilience, you could have talked only about yourself, but you found it fitting to bring other people, other vice-chancellors and so on. And tonight we say we appreciate you. I thought I should say that so that, it's recorded, that it's on record, that, you are one of the most unselfish person, if there's such a word in English, unselfish, or let me say selfless person that I know. And thank you very much. May the good Lord bless you, with lots of energy and many more days and months to celebrate more, and let us learn from you. He's also competitive, that we collaborate more than we compete. So I told him that I don't know about you. I'll be wearing my colors because our colors at the great University of Johannesburg, it's, it's orange or nothing. And then he said to me, remember, I'm the commander-in-chief of the Red Army. That he is collaborating here with the commander-in-chief of the Orange Army, of the great University of Johannesburg. So that said, Prof, please feel welcomed. This is your home. And I'm so grateful you brought colleagues in large numbers from TUT. Please enjoy your time here, because whenever we visit, you welcome us, with open arms, and you make us feel welcomed and as part of the Red Army. TUT-FM is working side by side with UJ-FM, and this is how it goes, so we welcome you. Please allow me to say something, colleagues, about Professor Tinyiko Maluleke, a personal story. You may think we meet now as vice-chancellors, but the truth be told, we come a long way. I feel emotional because Professor Maluleke's wife taught at the same high school as my older sister, who passed away 3 years ago. And as a young researcher, around 2000, I was doing research. I'm a lawyer by training, as many of you would know. I was doing research on affirmative action. And I came across an interesting article with the title, Do I, with my PhD, need affirmative action? Something along those lines, Prof. Written by one Dr. Tinyiko Maluleke. I knew that his wife worked with my sister. When I arrived at home, at my sister's house, I said, please hook me up. So the message went via my sister to Maluleke, to him. Guess what? The next day, I had a photocopy of that article. And then the first professorial inauguration I attended, it was his professorial. I had no clue what professors do at this type of thing. He sent me an invitation at UNISA, Prof. I hope you remember. And I said, I heard about places I never thought. Ghana, when you talked about how people celebrate God, I still remember your lecture. How people would put God in everything. Their texts would be, God bless me, and all those things. I never thought that I would be a chief in Ghana. And when I was there, I thought about how I interacted with Ghana through you, Prof, because you traveled there and you're proud to share your experiences. Now, I said to myself, one day, when I'm professor, I wish this man, should be there, and I'll remind him how he inspired me. And guess what? At my inauguration as professor, he was there. So, colleagues, it's not just about now when people are vice-chancellors. And the message here, and as part of resilience, cooperate, collaborate, irrespective of titles and so on, and just continue to care about others, to inspire others, because small actions, you'll never know what they mean to an upcoming scholar. So I thought I should share that, but it's not about me. There are people who are going to engage some more. Please allow me to introduce the Commander-in-Chief of the Red Army, the Vice-Chancellor and Principal of, we reserve great for UJ, of the mighty Tshwane University of Technology. As far as I'm concerned, sorry, Prof, where is Prof Mandla, the chairperson of the Council of VUT? I think in terms of University of Technologies, you still have some catching up to do when it comes to TUT, and it's largely because of the man we are celebrating today, who wrote this wonderful book. But let me not alienate friends, because you are all important to me. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Tinyiko Maluleke was born in Soweto, and bred in both Limpopo and Soweto. So it's born in Soweto and bred in both Limpopo and Soweto. Prof. Tinyiko Maluleke is the Vice-Chancellor, ladies and gentlemen, and Principal of the mighty Tshwane University of Technology. He has served in the following executive management roles in the South African higher education sector, including being Executive Director Research and Deputy Registrar at UNISA, Deputy Vice-Chancellor Internationalization, Student Affairs and Advancement at the great University of Johannesburg, Advisor to the Vice-Chancellor and Principal at the University of Pretoria. Ladies and gentlemen, as part of his science advocacy and community engagement, Professor Maluleke has served as National Research Foundation board member. He currently serves as the Deputy Chairperson of the National Planning Commission. For multiple times, he has been on the panel of judges of the most prestigious non-fiction book prize in South Africa, the Sunday Times Ellen Payton Book Prize and the Non-Fiction Book Prize of the National Institute of Humanities and Social Sciences. Professor Maluleke is a well-published scholar in his area of expertise, religion and politics, and one of the most well-rounded and interdisciplinary scholars of the humanities and social sciences. Until January 2024, Professor Maluleke was an NRF B1 rated researcher with more than 100 peer-reviewed publications. Professor Maluleke has also supervised more than a dozen PhD students to completion. The last 3 of his PhD students completed at the University of Pretoria, that is in 2022, that is 2 students, and Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam in 2023, that is 1 student. He is an elected member of the Academy of Science of South Africa. His memoir, Faces and Faces of Resilience, a memoir of a special kind, has been published, and this is what we are launching tonight, published by none other than Tracy McDonald of Tracy McDonald Publishing. You have to be kind to your publisher. During the first half of 2025, of course, it just came out now, ladies and gentlemen. Professor Maluleke has been a visiting professor and a researcher and a research fellow, apologies, at, amongst others, the following universities: Hamburg University in Germany, University of Vienna in Austria, University of Nairobi, Kenya, Calvin University in the USA, University of Helsinki, Finland, University of Lausanne, Switzerland, University of Lund, Sweden, and University of Johannes Gutenberg, Mainz in Germany. Ladies and gentlemen, before I sit down, I want to say something, and to show I read the book. Prof, my wish and dream for the book is that I wish, and they say if wishes were horses, beggars would ride. I wish somebody one day would see the value in this well-written book. You are gifted, Prof, with words, and turn this into a series for Netflix or something. Each chapter is a series on its own. And I'm not saying this because there is a chapter about the Karate Kid, some Karate Kid, but each chapter really is a story on its own that must be shared with millions. That is my dream and my wish for this book. Now, coming from a village, I concluded that yours is not a village if it doesn't have a ghost story or ghost stories. I don't want to spoil it. You must buy the book. It's available for sale, and read about ghost stories for yourself. It's not just about ghost stories, but just amazing people. You can sit there, just imagine these people and say, wow, I also have similar people. And the purpose of this book, in as much as it covers you and other people, but I'm sure many people can see themselves in that book. At my village, Prof, there is this ghost story about, I don't know, in Afrikaans they call it roomkan. I don't know what you call it, this metal can that is used to collect milk. I don't know if you have seen it. The older people will know about it. They say there is that can buried there in one of the bushes of the village, guarded by an old white ghost. But why ghosts are always white, I don't know, but this is what we go. And I'm not saying whites are ghosts, please. This is what we were told. And it is full of Krugerrands. And as a child, I saw big cars as a child coming because people were poor. Big Mercedes-Benzes would go into the bush and then they'd come out as fast as they went in, never to return. And there would be stories that there was lightning during the day and so on. So, Prof, this book, each and every chapter deserves to be this book must be a series with chapters being parts of this. And remember me when this happens. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Professor Tinyiko Maluleke.
If an alien landed near Hammanskraal at the Utsani High School in 1991, she would have been met by a bunch of noisy, untidy-looking kids, none of whom looked like a future labor law scholar, let alone a future vice-chancellor. Among the pupils at Utsani High School, our visiting alien would not have missed a starry-eyed, stocky, somewhat pugnacious, and rather argumentative 16-year-old called Litlokwa George Mpedi. At that time, Litlokwa had struck up an excellent mentee-mentor relationship with one of the teachers, Mr. Stevens Ramafuko, who doubled up as his private karate instructor. Stevens Ramafuko was to Litlokwa George Mpedi what Mr. Han or Jackie Chan was to Dre Parker, Jaden Smith, in the 2010 Hollywood blockbuster The Karate Kid. To this day, Professor Litlokwa George Mpedi credits his sense of discipline, penchant for hard work, and awareness of the importance of strategy and tactics, as well as his love of the law, to Mr. Ramafuko. The sun was beating down upon the throng, which sat in almost perfect silence. Women in shawls and colorful head wraps sat on the cow-down floor of the courtyard, while men, some with their bald heads glistening in the sun, squatted on boulders and tree stumps scattered around the four-thatch huts of our homestead. In the veld nearby, cattle were grazing. Goats wrapped their long tongues around thorny shrubs. Hens cackled, and emaciated mongrel dogs lingered languidly around the open-air kitchen. In the midst of the crowd was a carefree toddler. He was bouncing from one loving knee to the next, jumping from one lap to another, and shuffling from one tight hug to the next as his audience took turns to embrace and tickle him. That carefree toddler was none other than yours truly. As it eventually turned out, the gathering was not so joyous an occasion. In fact, it was a funeral. This was no ordinary funeral. It was my mother's. The low-feld village of Nombe. Wow, thank you very much. Professor Litlokwa Mpedi, the Karate Kid, who grew up to become the formidable Vice-Chancellor and Principal of the great University of Johannesburg. Thank you. My distinguished discussants and panelists, let me begin by acknowledging communication specialist, accomplished member of the Fourth Estate, award-winning broadcast journalist, columnist, and National Planning Commissioner, Ms. Nikiwe Bigicha. I hope she is watching us online. She will join us later. I also wish to acknowledge the presence in our midst of Dr. Ruel Khoza, Chancellor of the University of KwaZulu-Natal, business leader, corporate governance guru extraordinaire, and prolific author. Professor Baso Nzenze, Dean of the Faculty of Humanities, Program Director, Dr. Sifiso Mnisi, Head of the School of Communication at UJ, colleagues, students, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of myself and Wasimioni, aka Mrs. Maluleke, and on behalf of all members of the Maluleke clan in the audience today, I salute you. Thank you for gracing us with your presence online and in the flesh tonight. On this cold evening, it warms my heart to be part of a gathering of knowledge seekers, knowledge lovers, summoned by a book. But first, the disclaimers. My book consists of 49 chapters, but it has nothing to do with the 49 South African refugees who recently landed in the USA. Completely coincidental. Secondly, although 7 times 7 is equal to 49, and 7 is rumored to be the biblical number of perfection and completeness, I can assure you that there is no secret Da Vinci Code embedded into the 49 chapter structure of my book. Even though one of the 49 chapters is a fervent letter straight from the heart of God to the heart of our former Chief Justice, Mogoeng. There is nothing quite as esoteric and mystical in the rest of the book, I promise you. Now, if you want, please start with that chapter on Mogoeng. And every time I meet with him, I change direction and run because of that chapter. Mine is a book premised on the rather mundane phenomenon of resilience, seeking to provide a kaleidoscopic, hopefully captivating, evocative, and thought-provoking profile of selected phases, and places of resilience, including those that pertain to my own short journey on Earth. Too short. One reviewer has already complained that I should write more about myself. Not sure about that. These offerings are served diachronically, synchronically, and eclectically, often on the border between fiction and non-fiction, and sometimes on the border between sanity and insanity, some of the chapters. Resilience is generally understood to mean the physical, mental, and spiritual strength to endure, to bounce back from, to adapt to, or to overcome severe situations of stress and disadvantage. Understood as such, resilience is a felt, known, and well understood phenomenon available to communities, societies, and nations for hundreds, if not thousands of years. The formal academic study of resilience has been led by, predictably, developmental and child psychologists. However, the discipline of psychology neither discovered nor invented resilience. At the risk of oversimplification, the traditional research questions have generally included the following: why and how do some people, children or adults, handle and overcome stressful situations better than others? Under what conditions, material or psychological, does resilience emerge or thrive? Is resilience innate and embedded into the human psyche? Does resilience lurk deep in the ocean of collective human consciousness as a potential resource available to one and all who may simply reach out and touch it? Nowhere is resilience more palpable as a need, a net or a magnet, a source or a resource, than in individuals, groups, societies, and nations undergoing one upheaval or the other, whether such upheaval is short-term or for a lifetime, whether such upheaval is personal or interpersonal, communal or environmental, whether it is caused by a high-intensity war or low-intensity war, an epidemic or a pandemic, climate change, racism, colonialism, post-colonization, recolonization, patriarchy, gender-based violence, and so on and so forth. Many of the subjects of my book are born and bred in these kinds of situations of danger and adversity, hence the evocation of resilience. For without the challenge of adversity and difficulty, there is little to no resilience to speak about. My book is neither a textbook on resilience nor an academic investigation into the phenomenon, not even from the vantage point of any of the usual suspect disciplines that tend to dabble into that topic, such as anthropology, sociology, psychology, theology, and political science. Nor is my book a DIY resilience manual containing such topics as 7 steps to a lifestyle of resilience, or how to be resilient after divorce, or 7 mantras that will make you resilient one day at a time, or how to build resilient families. You will find no such formulas in the book. That is in part because not only is resilience contextual, but it is also not reducible to a packet of verbal vitamin pills for daily consumption. It is much more complex than that. Because adversity never retires. Human resilience is never a once and for all event for which we can design a formula. Resilience is a set of skills and responses that must be summoned again and again, each time differently. So, you'll find that in my book, the phenomenon of resilience is threaded through all the chapters, directly and indirectly, overtly and covertly, bluntly or nuanced. In the book, my weapon of choice is narrative, research, humor, polemics, memory, imagination, tragedy, and even lamentation. What I will call, for lack of a better phrase, literary evocation or even literary provocation. We need to be aware of binaries. Narrative is not the opposite of hard-nosed research, and no one explains this better than Toni Morrison when, in the prelude to her acceptance speech of the Nobel Literature Prize in 1993, she said, and I quote her, "Fiction has never been entertainment for me. It has been the work I have done for most of my adult life. I believe that one of the principal ways in which we acquire, hold, and digest information is via narrative." And so I hope you will understand when the remarks I make begin with what I believe to be the first sentence of our childhood that we all remember, that being the phrase, "Once upon a time." Once upon a time, there was an old woman, blind but wise. And so begins her lecture. I too start my book with a story of one such old woman of resilience, my grandmother. She who dragged me to school on my first day, literally dragged me to school. An illiterate old woman who later taught me not only the art of reading and writing letters for her, but also the art of reading life and writing life. Long before I was born, with a child on her back, My grandmother joined hundreds of fellow farm workers to work at the citrus plantations of New England, otherwise known as Nyongilandi, at the banks of the Levubu River in order to earn a living so she could bring up her children and her grandchildren. When my mother died, Grandma seamlessly became mother. She also enabled me to have a relationship with my dead mother, if that is possible at all. In the first chapter of the book, I recall the funeral of my mother, an event I inexplicably remember with the vivid clarity of a haunting dream. I then join her, my mother that is, in the last walk she undertook with her husband, my father. And I track and trace them through the landmarks of the rural village of my youth, all the way up to the D4, that strip of road that links Louis Trichardt to Malamulele village. And I also write about her collapse on the way back. And that's when grandmother had to take care of business. For my grandmother, resilience was neither a one-way traffic nor a mono-directional road. I saw her stand up to calamity after calamity. But I also saw her break, and I've seen her broken. Sometimes in the middle of mindlessly reading out aloud a letter to her, I would lift up my head to find my grandmother's face covered in tears. Thinking that perhaps I had misread or misspoken, I would say, "What's wrong, Grandma?" And amid sobs, she would say, "Keep reading the letter." She died in 2011, but not before coming to my house to inaugurate my living room into an ancestral shrine, the story with which I end the chapter on her. But my grandmother was not unique. Grandma Nketeleng Litunya Linka, the grandmother of the Vice-Chancellor of UNISA, Professor Puleng Linkabula, was just the same. I interviewed her. The grandmother of the Auditor General, Tshwane Maluleke, Grandma Elina Mshengi Makubele, was also very similar. I also spoke to her, just like I interviewed Professor Mpedi. The grandmother, who was known as Ramadimeja Madisha, a quadriplegic, known to her grandchildren as Kukumma, amazingly brought up her grandson, Matlahulu Musa Mushabela, the current Vice-Chancellor of the University of Cape Town. She taught him, and I quote, how to head her goats and cattle, to milk the cows, to cook, to think, to love, to persevere, and to do life in general. And yet she was a quadriplegic, lying flat. She also told him to go and study medicine so he could come back and provide care and healing for her. Is there a nobler reason for studying to become a medical doctor than to go there in order to come back and heal your own grandmother? But I also suggest that Mushabela's grandmother redefined leadership. From that vantage position of lying flat, as she led her grandson and instructed him to bring the cattle home and to pass them in front of her so that she could count if they were all back. Another granny's child is the South African sports hero, Siya Kolisi. He himself says, and I quote, "There have been many important people in my life over the years, people who have guided and shaped me, but none more so than my grandmother. I called her auntie, and without her, I wouldn't be here." Think of Chilizi Marwala, the former Vice-Chancellor of this university, now a globally recognized expert in AI. He was inspired by his pot-making grandmother, Vochianelo, to become a mechanical engineer after he had observed how she goes about making pots. The musician with a golden voice, Vusi Mahlasela, child of a single parent, also thanks his grandmother, Mapechi Aida Mahlasela, for the person he has become. To make ends meet, Grandma Mahlasela operated a shebeen in Mamelodi. That shebeen was known as Hamamushwesh or Kosgodipola. The gramophone at his grandmother's shebeen opened a whole new world of music to young Mahlasela. From some of the shebeen patrons, Mahlasela learned and developed a taste for style. He probably has a little bit more style than you and I. He learned about stretched caps, two-tone shoes, Telerina skirts, boot juice shoes, and stove-piped trousers. The other half of my childhood, as already mentioned by Prof, and it's all in the book, was spent in Middlelands Zone 8, beneath the artificial yellow mountains made out of mine dumps. There I was the tormented occupant of 1/3 of our family house, 3-roomed house. I occupied the kitchen, which doubled up as my bedroom. Except that during weekends, I couldn't sleep until my father and his drinking buddies had finished their drinking. They are dancing and they are singing. Their songs still haunt my sleep to this day. And then one day, I landed a school holidays job at number 216 Bree Street, where my father worked. And there, I met the father I never knew I had. Instead of the assertive man he was among his friends and family at his Matchbox house in Soweto, the Obed Maluleke of 216 Bree Street was as meek as a lamb, even in the face of verbal abuse. On the homeward bound bus every evening, he would put his dops on and seamlessly transform into the father I knew. Whenever I tried to discuss the disrespect he endured at work, my father always changed the topic into a session about growing up, finishing school, getting a job, and holding it down. Was that resilience? Or was it all about the deployment of what political scientist James Scott calls the weapons of the weak? You will find in the book reflections on the tremendous roles of fathers. The father of Professor Tinyiko, the current Vice-Chancellor of Mpumalanga University, who shaped her. The father of Pamela Dube, Professor Pamela Dube, the current Vice-Chancellor of the Central University of Technology. The father of Nelson Mandela, who he says, when his father died, he felt that he was cut adrift. He says that his father had a patch of gray hair, and he used to look for gray clay to paint his hair so that he looks like his father, even though he was much younger. The father of Chinua Achebe, about whom he writes. Chinua Achebe is the name of this venue. Yeah. And many, many other fathers. And yes, there is humor in the book. Humor is a powerful resource for resilience. The sense of humor of the Valdesia residents, that is the village in Limpopo where I grew up, in the face of enemies within and enemies from outside on the other side of the river, was just amazing. The missionaries distributed Bibles in the village. It was a mission station. And guess what the people used the Bible pages to do with? They took the Bible pages and used them as toilet paper. the missionaries also forbade the singing of traditional songs, especially the dancing. They didn't like the dancing. And what did the villagers say? The villagers say, you know, the only reason the missionaries do not allow sex before marriage is because they fear it might lead to traditional dancing. But sometimes even humor is not enough. When faced with adversity in life, resilience does not always help us win, certainly not in the short term. It does not always take us to the finish line, that is resilience. Sometimes adversity is greater than our grit and our tenacity, so that we are reduced to scraping from the bottom of our barrels of resilience. That is when the strategy of lament may be deployed. According to Catholic theologian Emmanuel Katongore, lament is the language we use to make sense out of senselessness, meaning out of suffering, humanity out of inhumanity, and hope out of hopelessness. There are several chapters of lament in my book, some of them rather heart-wrenching. There's a chapter titled A Country in the Shadow of the Valley of Death, which looks at how we survived COVID. There's a chapter on Anine Boysen of Bredasdorp, the 17-year-old girl who was raped and disemboweled and left to die by someone she knew. There's a chapter on Togozo Mayenziwe Xaba, killed by a lover. There's a chapter titled A Map of Our Bloody Country, which is an account of the litany of massacres, big and small, that our country has been through. There's a chapter on the country we are losing, where I pose as a funeral orator at the funeral of a famous liberation movement. For me, therefore, resilience is personal, it is communal, it is societal, it is environmental, and it encompasses the animal world too. In my essay titled Valdezia Fights Back, or the chapter titled Valdezia Fights Back, I portray and I conscript the rivers, the mountains, the valleys, the escarpments, the landmarks of that greater territory as part and parcel of the soldiers of resistance. Because the river sustained the community. The forest also sustained the community, but that forest was also being destroyed. And then there's a chapter on my dog, Bruno, that freedom fighter who will be dancing with Jesus when Jesus returns. At the end, I recall the stories that my grandmother told us, which is where my love for storytelling comes from. She told us this story, that long, long ago there was a madman, and this is I'm finishing now. Long, long ago there was a madman who lived in a remote village. With his trademark limp, the village madman would walk back and forth from one end of the village to the other, singing meaningless songs and mouthing incoherent sentences day and night. One hot summer day, during one of his aimless promenades, the madman passed a group of men swimming in the local lake. He noticed a heap of clothes belonging to the swimmers on the banks of the lake. Suddenly, in what he thought was a brilliant idea, the madman grabbed the heap of clothes, put them under his smelly armpit, and before the shocked swimmers could do anything, the madman sprinted away towards the neighboring village, taking their clothes with him. The swimmers faced a dilemma. Do they, in their nakedness, immediately exit the lake to pursue the fleeing madman in order to retrieve their clothes? Can you imagine them running after him, shouting, That man is mad, that man is mad. And people would look at them saying, but you are naked, you must be the mad ones. Or do they stay in the water? If they chose to stay in the water, they would have to wait until sunset so that they could discreetly make their way home under cover of darkness. But there was another problem. The sacred traditions of the village prescribed that any adult found walking naked in the dead of night should immediately be put on trial on accusation of witchcraft, a crime for which the death penalty was applicable. So what do you think the swimmers should do? Grandma would ask us. We would disagree endlessly about the best course of action for the swimmers to take. I think the swimmers who ran after the madman, even though they were naked, if they took that option, would be like writers of memoirs. If they stayed in the water until it was dark, they would be writers of biographies. So you can work out which type I am. Let me say a quick word of thanks, Prof. Mpedi, to your bomb squad, led by one Smangele Zwane. I don't know all the members of that bomb squad, but I know Reneka Pandey, Theodora Modise, and many others. There's also a TUT bomb squad, led by Ms. Papama Chisikawe. Once again, I will not mention each and every one in case I get into trouble for forgetting some of them. What a wonderful gift you have given to me. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Program Director, ladies and gentlemen, I need to correct just one small issue. I always confess, people at UJ know, these introductions, I always botch them and made a big mistake, and let me correct it. I also want to acknowledge Professor Baso Nzenze, Vice Dean at the Faculty of Humanities. This would not be possible if it was not for the generous contribution and support of Professor Nzenze and the faculty. Please extend our appreciation to the Executive Dean, Professor Kamila Naidu. They say Uska Bora Mureki. Everything here is because of the Faculty of Humanities, and Professor Nzenze played an important role coordinating everything. Thank you, Prof, and apologies once again.
I think our DJ might be starting to nap because we are supposed to be hearing an audio excerpt from the book.
The low-felled village of Mnombeleni, or Arthur's Seat, is wrapped around a hill in Bushbuck Ridge. There used to be a giant lychee tree on top of that hill, which is why it was named Mnombeleni, place of the lychee trees. Below the hill, a tributary of the Sabi River slithers through the gorges and vales of the picturesque rural village. This is the village where corporate denizen and writer Ruel Khoza was born. If there's any truth in what Mark Twain allegedly once said, that the two most important days in one's life are the day one is born and the day one finds out why, then for Ruel Khoza, the distance between those 2 days was rather short. But how does one born into a rural family of subsistence farmers imagine himself as a principal? What type of delusions of grandeur must afflict a rural head boy in Bushbuck Ridge of the 50s and 60s for such a boy to grow up earnestly believing that he had what it takes to become a principal one day?
Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a big round of applause to Professor Maluleke for this amazing memoir of a special kind. And I know that Prof. Maluleke says this is not a book on self-help or DIY or 7 steps on how to be resilient. But I can tell you now that the book does something very, very unique and very, very powerful in that it speaks about resilience using a powerful mode of storytelling. And not just the storytelling in a fictional manner, but uses faces of real people and ordinary people. I suppose now that we are reading about their stories, they're not so ordinary, of course, but they were once ordinary and have become extraordinary. And that is where the power of the phases of resilience lies. So once again, Professor Maluleke, I'm really honored to have had such an opportunity to direct the program for the launch of this amazing book, A Memoir of a Special Kind. Ladies and gentlemen, let's once again give a resounding round of applause to Professor Maluleke. So I've read the book. I started reading the book very recently. I'm not done with it yet. But something powerful started happening is that you start to imagine yourself. I mean, Prof. Maluleke does something very, very special in that he transports you, right, across the different phases of resilience. And I don't want to be the only one who experiences this splendor, this greatness, this amazing experience about resilience. So I want to encourage each and every one of you to get yourself a copy of this amazing book at only 350 rands. We've got the table that has got the books at the back. You can purchase yourself a copy. 350 rands. If you're unemployed, hey, 350. All right, so please put that 350 to good use tonight. Get yourself a book. All right, so as we continue then with the program tonight, we also arranged a discussion segment where we will have discussants that will share their own insights and their own experience about the book. And I hope that our audiences who are joining us online are also still with us. So please, as we are still continuing the program, do not go away. I've got a special surprise, a special treat for you later on. But for now, we are moving on to the next segment of this program where we are getting on to the discussion of the book. And I've got 2 discussants, but I'm going to start with our first discussant. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce you to the formidable Dr. Ruel Khoza. Dr. Ruel Khoza is a prominent businessman, corporate chairman, and spokesperson and opinion leader. He is currently chairman of Discovery Bank, president of the Institute of Directors South Africa, and chancellor of the University of KwaZulu-Natal. He's a former chair of Ashupol, Eskom, Nedbank, and Dr. Khoza. I tried, but the company is called GlaxoSmithKline, but we know it as GSK. You know GSK, that is the company. So GlaxoSmithKline. Now, Dr. Khoza has served also on the boards of Old Mutual, Standard Bank, NEMPAC, Sasol, and the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, and was involved in the formulation of the King Codes on Corporate Governance. His qualifications include a BA Honours in Psychology, a Master of Arts in Marketing, and an Engineering Doctorate in Business Leadership. The DCON, also Dr. Khoza has got a number of honorary qualifications. He's got a D in Econ, as well as 2 LLDs. He's also a leading avocado farmer and exporter, a cattle and fish farmer. I'm trying to lobola someone, doctor. May I borrow the cows? And he's also a choral and classic music producer. He's author of 7 books on business and business leadership, including The book titled Let Africa Lead, Attuned Leadership and the Spirit of Leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, we are truly blessed to have in our midst Dr. Ruel Khoza. Help me welcome him to the stage with a big round of applause.
Do I say a little bit first before the discussion?
You can just get right into it.
Professor Amperi, your colleagues in this wonderful campus, the great University of Johannesburg. There are those down east in KwaZulu-Natal who would actually challenge that. They would say there are greater universities than yours, but I know you're the greatest, and I will defer. Thank you very much. MC Swiso, you have been very, very generous introducing me. You could very easily have said Ruel Khoza will be one of the discussants. He is, in fact, a capitalist without capital, and stopped there. But be that as it may, Prof. Tinyiko, thank you very much for that voiceover introducing me. Now I know, and I will be telling my family as to what should be said at my funeral. Play that voiceover, play no more, scatter the ashes and go. Prof. Maluleke is my place of hiding, as it were. What I do by way of introducing myself is, my name is Ruel Khoza. I share an alma mater with Professor Tinyiko Maluleke, namely Bankuna High School, 10 years apart. And I'm not going to say who is the older of the two. Professor, I'll say a few things I've been requested to say to reflect on leadership and resilience flowing out of your book. My reflections will focus on thinking, magnanimity, gender maturity, reconceptualizing Mandela, and a fresh look at Biko. Running through that will be this golden chain of resilience. I was given only 5 minutes, and I'll have to be very, very crisp. And giving 5 minutes to the son of a preacher is, in fact, a travesty. It is more like the 5 minutes with a zero that makes it 50 minutes, because somehow you give me a platform to say something, I mistake it for a pulpit, and mistake the opportunity for somebody talking extra cathedra, like God talking through me. But I'll try to contain that in 5 or 6 minutes. I've indicated I'll be talking a little bit about thinking. Thinking essentially because the hallmark of leadership is thinking. not just thinking, but thinking and reflecting. Not just thinking and reflecting, but thinking and thinking about thinking. And there's a great deal of people masquerading as leaders who do not care to think. Prof. Maluleke writes about when he was actually challenged an act of depositing, he argues, with the students being the depositories and the teacher the depositor. Instead of communicating, the teacher issues communiques and makes deposits, which the students patiently receive, memorize, and regurgitate. And most unfortunately, this is a kind of education some of us were subjected to. And more tragically, this is a kind of education our children are still subjected to. The sinner's vessels to be filled with so-called wisdom, some of which may actually be antique and irrelevant. Tinyiko's encounter at FEDSAM, which is where he actually studied theology in Pietermaritzburg, had this experience which he recounts himself. I quote, "In Ferrerian terms, my sporadic spasms of talent notwithstanding, I was, up to that point, an excellent depository throughout my primary and high school education. Imagine my shock when I received my first assignment from the late Dr. Simon Kubule at FEDSAM in Pietermaritzburg. We started with the question phrase, what do you think? What do I think? Who? Me? Does it matter what I think? Until then, no teacher had ever asked me what I thought. They always asked me what I remembered from the facts that had been deposited into me. Until then, what I thought was not part of my education. I was immediately thrown into a deep epistemological crisis, close quote. What is lamentable is that till this day, this kind of teaching is in fact more rife than the teaching that challenges. A good number of us go to university to be produced as packaged goods, manufactured at the University of Limpopo, branded BCom, we take it, job done. The second thing that I would like to comment on, having worked a little bit with Professor Tinyiko Maluleke and having been challenged to write the foreword, would be magnanimity. With commendable magnanimity, Maluleke extols the virtues of competitors, giving credence to the dictum that great leadership, which Tinyiko Maluleke is imbued with, is competitively as magnanimous in defeat as it is in triumph. He deeply appreciates that the success of others does not diminish one's own success. but adds to the Commonwealth. That's the Tinyiko I know. Third, I would like to comment very briefly on gender maturity, cognitive aspects. In his own impactful way, Maluleke wages war against GBV and the contempt and derision visited upon women through profiling luminary women as national exemplars, women of color and valor, including inter alia Prof. Puleng Linkabula, UNISA Vice-Chancellor, Tshwane Maluleke, Auditor General, Nadine Gordimer, and Wangari Maathai, Nobel Peace Prize winners, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, first African woman president, trailblazing Nonkululeko Gobodo, first black woman CA in South Africa, global female leaders, Michelle Obama, former First Lady of the United States of America, and Kamala Harris, Vice President of the, or erstwhile Vice President of the United States of America. These receive glorious accolades as world-class sources of inspiration, profiled by Prof. Maluleke in his book. Of particular interest among the instructive profiles penned by Tinyiko are the young women murdered by both boyfriends as well as by strangers. These are presented so evocatively, they should, in fact, hit the solar plexus of the nation. The third commentary I would like to make has to do with reconceptualizing iconic Mandela. A lot has been written about Mandela. Prof. Maluleke looks at him afresh and suggests perhaps that's the better way we should actually be conceptualizing him. Male iconic leaders and national benefactors such as Nelson Mandela, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Steve Bantu Biko, Thabo Mbeki, Samora Machel, Sam Zima, Askia Mphahlele, and Imtiaz Sooliman are given fresh and refreshing treatment. Of Nelson Mandela, Maluleke admonishes his readers, you and I, to heed that the time has come for him to find his place among great national, continental, and world leaders. That this is the only way we can remember him appropriately. That over-essentializing Nelson Mandela in relation to his peers reduces rather than enhances his stature. Fifth and last, Maluleke's profiling of Steve Biko throws down the gauntlet to contemporary black intelligentsia. He perceives Biko, or Biko's outstanding trait, as the ability to articulate rage with crystal clarity, advocacy for unity across political and ethnic divisions, and I think that's important, courage and a penchant for building institutions, profound appreciation of religion, politics, education, economics, and psychology. Significantly, because defiant hope was surreal. We have set out, I quote, sorry, we have set out on a quest for true humility and humanity. And somewhere in this distant horizon, we can see the glittering prize, close quote. A powerful vision for Ubuntu, I must say, and what later became the Batupili ANC campaign. His mission was to bestow on South Africa and the world the ultimate gift, a more human face. Because lasting legacy is student activism, community projects, and public health interventions. In Maluleko's view, Biko's vision is contemptuously betrayed by South Africa's current abominations, masquerading as leadership. I need to conclude. 5 minutes is what I was given. Whether it is Sachirizi Marwala, Tito Mboweni, Thabo Mbeki, Dudu Mokwa, or Antoinette Ntuli, or anyone I've briefly profiled above, the golden chain running through their exemplary lives is characterized by a sense of destiny, from which sense of destiny they derive clear vision, from which vision they carve out their purpose for life. Unwavering commitment, diligence, attendant intellectual preparation, and most importantly, resilience, the persistence to keep on keeping on. All of these are hallmarks of impactful leadership. And Professor Maluleke has given that superabundant treatment in his book. I urge all of us to read the book.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Khoza, for those wonderful reflections. And that was definitely the 5 minutes with a zero. Like how preachers in church say, I'm closing, I'm closing. Once the pastor says, I'm closing, give him an hour more. But thank you so much, Dr. Khoza. That was very well said. And now I'm going to move over to the next segment of the discussion where we'll get a critical analysis of the memoir, and this will be done by Ms. Nikiwe Pikicha, who is joining us online, and I can see Ms. Pikicha is ready to soldier ahead. Good evening, Ms. Pikicha. This is me trying to test the audio. Are you able to hear us, Ms. Pikicha? I think Ms. Pikicha is muted. So while you mute, Nazo. Okay, I think it's she's unmuted now. So briefly, I want to introduce Ms. Nikiwe Pikicha. So Ms. Nikiwe Pikicha is an accomplished media and communications professional with over 25 years experience in journalism, public affairs, and strategic advisory roles. A former broadcast journalist, she has reported on politics and socio-economic issues for South Africa's leading news platforms. She is a Fulbright Humphrey Fellow and holds an MSc in African Studies from the University of Oxford, as well as a postgraduate degree in journalism and media studies from Wits University. Nikiwe currently serves on several high-profile boards, including the Nelson Mandela Foundation, where she chairs the annual lecture and dialogue subcommittee, and Deloitte Africa, where she also contributes to Deloitte Global's Independent Non-Executive Advisory Council. She's a member of South Africa's Third National Planning Commission and the director of the Thomson Reuters Funders Share Company, where she safeguards editorial independence and integrity in global media. Without wasting any time, I'm going to hand over to Ms. Nikiwe Bikicha to give us a critical analysis of the memoir of a special kind.
Thank you so much, Reverend Director. Good evening.
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, we can hear you, Ms. Bikicha. I'm not sure whether. I'm just not sure whether.
Firstly, good evening. To the University of Johannesburg for their very kind invitation, and especially the Vice-Chancellor. Thank you so much, and good evening. It's a great honor and a privilege for me to be here this evening to share some reflections and insights on this book. In my other life, as has been indicated in the bio, Professor Maluleke is my boss as the Deputy Chair of the National Planning Commission. For our sins, we try and contribute and provide advice on South Africa's long-term plan. And I just wanted to say and echo some of the sentiments which have been shared here about Professor Maluleke's immense leadership capabilities and attributes, where he has led us at the National Planning Commission with such integrity, with such wisdom, and with such magnanimity as well. So I just wanted to share those sentiments and echo some of that which has been shared about the caliber of leader and academic that Professor Maluleke is. I'll weigh in then on the book. I was very fortunate to have seen the manuscript around about this time last year, actually, when Professor Maluleke shared that manuscript with me and asked whether I would actually write a blurb for the book, which I subsequently did. And I want this evening to share three things: overarching overview of the book, and then touch on, not drill into, because we don't have much time, but two salient themes which emerge as important. They're not the only important ones, but they're the ones that I wish to touch on today. So firstly, my overview of the book as we embark on this critical analysis, and not to repeat what other speakers have said, but Professor Maluleke is a master wordsmith and storyteller. This book is absolutely delicious to sink your teeth into. I have written in the blurb that it's a collection of musings and essays that is woven together and paints a very rich tapestry of life in South Africa today, while never taking its eyes off the rearview mirror of the past. And that past is always with us, infusing everything we do or try to become as a country. It is an excellent and profound piece of creative nonfiction, as we would say in my world of journalism, as it employs the literary devices such as vivid language, imagery, and character development to create a compelling yet factual narrative. Prof has already mentioned that there are 49 chapters. There is style and flair brought to every chapter, making it eminently readable for a diverse audience. And even in that diversity, it does not compromise the coherence of the voice and the tone and the color of the author, imbued with humor, as Prof has said, in his own unique way. Personally, for me, and I'm going to agree with the reviewer who published a few weeks ago in the City Press, the most edifying part of the book, in my view, was where the author reflects on his own history, his own upbringing. And that part seemed to me too short, because it is so beautifully written, it's so evocative, and that as a reader, I was left hankering for more. So, Prof, I know you don't want to hear this, but I concur with the reviewer who has called for a full biography in time. But for now, we will review this particular book. I recall when I read the manuscript last year, I would be so engrossed and instantly transported across the country, across space and time. So gripped was I by the antics and adventures of the young Tinyiko that I couldn't wait to read the next chapter to see what he would get up to next. So I think there's room certainly to explore that aspect a bit further. I'd now like to touch on the two themes which I've reflected on in this book. And they are, in a sense, I've called them, they are interrelated, in a sense. And I call them women and greatness. Who gets to be great in the world? In his book, as Prof has read in some of the snippets that he's shared with us, there's a great deal of focus on the women who played such a seminal role in raising him. And he says thus, "The great women who stood in the gap to ensure that I got a chance in life." Now, as we know, South Africa is a vastly unequal society, and one of the sharpest of those cleavages is gender inequality. In this book, Maluleke shines the spotlight on some of the great and good men and women, but in my view, I believe it's mostly the lesser known women who I argue have or continue to define this country, who capture his attention. He places them at the center of his book. Now, typically in memoir or in profiling people, there's often a tendency to recognize or celebrate only the so-called great men with a capital G of any epoch. While Maluleke does cast his eyes on them and gives them a fresh take, as Dr. Koza has said, it is for me the ordinary, the humble, the simple, who come alive so vividly in this text and emerge as the stars of this narrative. The gaze shines brightly on them, tenderly and with reverence and respect, particularly of the women who raised him, and this theme, I see, carries through strongly as he profiles a number of colleagues in the academy and other sectors as well. In elegant and captivating prose, Maluleke elevates these stories, and by honoring his subject so dutifully and with such care, with his storytelling and astute observation, he, I argue, restores our own sense of humanity as we see ourselves reflected in them within the broader context of what I've said was an unequal society, particularly gender inequality. The women's struggles, their suffering, and their excellence is rendered visible in this book. By writing these women into history, they claim, no, he doesn't bestow this to them, they claim their rightful place in the world as great leaders with a capital G. Women are at the center of this book and are seen as equal because they are human first. These stories, I believe, also resonate with us because we, in some way, shape, or form, have also been raised by the very same women. And that's why the subsequent profiles of other leaders are so significant, because we begin to see the universality of the human experience, which begs us to see women as equals in any society. Now, a few years ago, when the UN Secretary General delivered the Nelson Mandela Annual Lecture in 2020, he spoke under the theme, Tackling Inequality, a New Social Contract for a New Era. Of the many things that he said, and there were many which were riveting and compelling, one of the things which stayed with me is when he said, in building a new social compact, we need to recognize that we belong to each other. So oftentimes it takes a books such as this one that Professor Maluleke has offered us to remind us of this, that we belong to each other and of this ubuntu and this shared existence by telling those stories. And once they are reflected to us, we see ourselves in them and other humans. The second aspect I want to reflect on is the notion of greatness itself. I know it has been referred to here in relation to UJ. I won't touch on that as a Wits graduate, so I shall stay out of that debate. But the notion of greatness with a capital G, again, which I think the book also challenges us to think about anew. I've always been fascinated by greatness, so I'm often reading profiles of biography. I want to know, how do people become who they are, or who they claim to be, and become successful in the face of odds, etc. But my curiosity in this book is that who gets bestowed with or conferred with this title, and why? What are the traits and characteristics which define whether a society deems someone exceptional enough to carry this mantle? Oftentimes, especially in popular media and popular culture, there's a tendency to recognize or to celebrate only those who are visibly successful. And that's all well and good because they probably deserve those accolades and recognition. Now, I'm talking about people in the arts, in sports, in business, etc. We can see them do what they do, and therefore it is easier to then celebrate and recognize them. What is different in this book, as a book that contains many profiles, is the sincere and I think successful attempt to extend that mantle of greatness to lesser known figures, or the unseen, who may not be in the public domain, nor in sectors, as I've mentioned above, that are often popularized. The distinct slant in this book towards leadership in academia is instructive and is to be welcome. It allows us, I think, to take stock of and to interrogate the immeasurable contribution of those in spaces of knowledge creation and production, academic excellence, stewards of higher education, and what it might involve or entail to exceed in those ivory towers. So now you could ask, why would we be interested in the caliber of those who occupy those offices? Those ivory towers are not there for their own sake. They exist to produce and develop thinkers, workers, professionals, artists, scientists who will lead this country. Therefore, this approach that Professor Maluleke gives us of enabling us a more intimate look into who they are and how they ascended to where they are is useful and reminds us once again that as humanity, we belong to each other. My final reflection on the book is around the theme of resilience itself, which is contained in the title, which I think Professor Maluleke has spoke about really well in his opening remarks. I want to argue that whilst we as South Africans celebrate and recognize, and it's noteworthy that we recognize our own resilience as a people who have overcome years of apartheid brutality and colonialism, as well as navigating the challenges of our democracy as well. Even as we talk about resilience and how it informs people's perspectives and chances of success in life, etc., I think it's also important for us to want more than to just overcome, or that suffering by itself is a prerequisite or a redemptive part of success. As South Africans, we also deserve joy. We also deserve peace, love, and dignity for its sake, but not as a reward because we've overcome something. Now here I'm not talking about a frivolous, self-indulgent ways of being, but systems which honor and treasure and value joy and kindness as something that we too, in our humanity, deserve. So those are my thoughts on the book thus far. Thank you so much, Program Director.
Thank you so much for those wonderful reflections, Ms. Nigwe Bikicha. We really appreciate that. Please, ladies and gentlemen, help me once more give a resounding round of applause to Ms. Nigwe Bikicha. So, remember earlier on I said I have got a surprise for all of you. Do you remember? All right. But now we have got a very vibrant online audience. All right. And what I would say to those who are online, I want to hear their voices, but I don't know if I can. Because it almost, you see, only speaking to people who are online, it's almost as if you need to engage with them by faith that they can hear me and they will answer. But I have got 6 book copies that I will be giving away free of charge, on condition that you engage with me in this Q&A. All right, and I can see that there are people outside who seem to be enjoying the beverages. Please call them back in. Right? Please ask them to make their way back in so that we all participate in this Q&A session. All right? So, ladies and gentlemen, I want us to be very, very quick in this because we are starting to run behind schedule. All right, so this is how we are going to do this. I will start online. Are there any questions or comments from the audiences that are online? Can I ask that my colleagues please keep a close eye on the interaction that is happening online. We've got a very huge attendance online, about 68 people at one point who are attending online. Now, this is really, really amazing. Yes, Prof. Maluleke, thank you so much for joining me. Is there anything, comment or question from our online audience? Suppose one of the most awkward things about being MC is when you're asking for comments online and then it's quiet, it's like you want to ask for a song. In the meantime, let us sing while we wait. Right? There is a question from online.
Just a question. For those of us who join virtually, where can we buy a copy of the book?
Oh, so sweet. We'll give it to you. Right? But for the rest of the audiences that are joining us online, I will hand over the response to the question to Prof. Maluleke.
Yeah, the book is available at all bookstores, especially at Exclusive Books, where it is one of the top 10 selling books in some exclusive bookstores. So,
is there another question online? So for now, I will come back into the room. Remember, 6 copies. Hands. Ooh, I'm going to start here. And then, go there.
Good evening. My name is Bongan Luthuli. Right here, Prof. Yeah, thank you. The name is Bongan Luthuli. The book, makes the reader cry and laugh at the same time. And it's beautifully written, but I have a question because the use of religion metaphorically seems to suggest, in my view at least, that the writer seems to be battling with his Africanity and his religion, and there seems to be some epistemological questions around a black man in Africa being Christian. And I think you defer the question away from you to the readers, but I think there are some innate contradictions and also convictions that you perhaps need to tell us about, Prof. Thank you.
no, I have no contradictions. My grandmother came and turned my living room into a shrine. I'm an African. But I think the question you raise is an old one. It's the question that S.K.M. Patele deals with in his book, Down Second Avenue. The Lishwana River that sits between his village and the Christian village is an important boundary marker for some of his narratives. You find the same in Ngugi, Wationgo, the river between. The river between is the river between the Christian side and the heathen side. And Valdezia Mission Station is a similar place. There are hills and mountains that divide the Christians from the non-Christians. And banning of traditional singing and traditional brewing and so on. Still people brought the drinks in their stomachs into the mission station. So there is that element that I talk about. There is a battle for ideas between different traditions, modernity, Christianity, and there's colonialism. So on the other, for example, at church, at Valdezia would sing the song, far away from this world, we have a place. And then we step out of the church and we look over at the other side of the river. We see those who have a place here. They live in beautiful houses and it's green. And so that contradiction is not mine. It is societal. You know, in 1913, when the Land Act was promulgated, R.T. Kaluza, Ruben Tolagele Kaluza, penned a song, and he called it the song goes something like Silusa Polose Africa, Sikalela Izwe Lagoetu. That song was then imported to our church in Valdezia, but they changed the words. It was no longer Scala Land Act Umteto Omubi. It was how beautiful it is to be united in Christ, how beautiful it is to be going to heaven. All the words, the tune remained Tolagale Kaluzas, but the content was no longer Tolagale Kaluza's protest. So it's not an inner contradiction of mine. It is a national community, maybe it's an African problem that I tackle. I don't try to solve it in the book, certainly, but I do highlight it.
All right. I saw this gentleman, you know, he was so eager from Ela, so I'm going to give him the chance and then I'll go to Sayade. And online, are there any questions yet? Next, please proceed.
Good evening. My name is Mehlaketo Chabalala. Actually, before I ask my question, that question that was asked online, it was my question. You said you're gonna give me that book. So, so reason you see me here, I just got in here. I asked that question long ago when I was on my way home, but I saw no one was answering it, so I decided to drive so I can get the book.
We will
here.
post the book.
Okay, thank you. So, Prof, while on my way home, I might have not heard you well, but you mentioned something like adversity never retires. So I'm interested, which exactly in the chapter that can elaborate that more so I can understand that statement in deeper details, that adversity never retires, and it can help me to find ways in which to deal with or maybe to address the issue or the challenges of adversity.
Well, you know, resilience is resilience because there is adversity. And we have to understand that resilience does not exist in a vacuum. And there is no point in life where unless when we die, I suppose we don't know whether you know, everybody dies peacefully, they say. But while we are still alive, we have to deal with adversity. Whether it's personal, interpersonal, communal, we have to deal with it. We have to navigate it. And sometimes we have no clue how to deal with adversity. And that's why I talk about lamentation. That's why I've got chapters that do not provide any solution, but lament as a way of making sense of the suffering that is going on. Think about us. 1994, or rather, let's go back. 1990, when Nelson Mandela took a few steps from Victor Verster prison, and he raised his feet and Winnie joined him. We thought we were moving into paradise. When we elected in 1994, we thought this is the end of our troubles. But have our troubles ended? Not really. And so such is adversity. Even when you think you have arrived, you haven't quite arrived. And so we have to do resilience over and over again, including doing resilience the way my father did it at 216 Bree Street. Running around like a small boy. In my language would say, "Abatsutsumanga kuboteka nyongwa." You know, so it's many. I think we have to think about the resilience before resilience, the resilience underneath resilience, the resilience above resilience, the resilience which comes, the resilience of our grandmothers, which enables us to look resilient, when in fact we may not be as resilient as all that if we were to remove their resilience. So adversity never retires. My grandmother didn't solve it, and I am still not able to solve adversity, remove it.
Okay, in the interest of time, I'm going to take the 2 questions online and then 1 more question from the venue so that at least it's utumisankari ngori ya ilile sweswo. Elava kumuka iyakaya ne. All right?
Thank you. The first is a comment. I think our society, more especially black people, have a tendency to cover our struggles with our faith as opposed to using it to fight. We cannot wait to read, so I can see how myself and how Prof has highlighted that point. And that's from Pilisa Vellum. Rudolph Peterson has a question. How does Prof Maluleke's portrayal of resilience challenge or reinforce the prevailing narratives of individualism and collective identity within South African society?
Prof, I'm going to give you 5 seconds without a zero.
One of my misgivings about resilience theory, psychological resilience theory, is precisely that it tends to be too individualistic. It focuses on vulnerable children, or as Dr. Koza always reminds me, Viktor Frankl's who survived the concentration camp and who doesn't survive it, and what is it that the one who survives has, and so on. But in my book, I touch on the resilience of communities, like the village community that was trying to deal with a problem together, and what resources they summon, among others, music. So if you read my book, I think you will find, if someone was to do an index of songs, the book has got many references to songs and musicians and music. In fact, I've got several chapters on musicians, because music is a communal thing, certainly in Africa, and it is when we respond to adversity as a community. Humor is one of them. I mean, think about Desmond Tutu. Desmond Tutu was always cracking jokes, But how do you crack a joke when you've just come back from Alexander where someone was about to be necklaced and you stopped them from necklacing that person? But it is the communal resources that produce your likes of Desmond Tutu. And there is a fig tree in my village called Malumbe, which they cut down, and I blame Dr. Koza for that because he was still at Eskom when they came to electrify our village. They cut down that river. I mean that tree. That tree was very resilient and helped us. I think it was probably 100 years old. Yeah. So it's not individual. Jeremy Meggs was interviewing me the other day at MoneyWeb, and he said, I say that resilience is only personal. It's not. It's not just individual. It is communal. And that is the part that I think we need to add.
Right. Just online, nothing. So thank you so much for all those who are joining us online. I'm going to give you Sir, and then I'm done. And then all the other books, Prof. Maluleke will decide who gets.
Thank you very much, Program Director. My name is Rudy Peterson, and I head up stakeholder relations here at UJ. I've got to be very careful. Prof. Maluleke is my former boss. And if I knew back in the day that there was storytelling, I would have challenged him more with the storytelling back in the day. But thank you, Prof. I think the first thing I want to say, this is such an insightful book. You've brought politics, sport, religion, music, all of it together in one piece. I just love the 49 chapters. I would like to believe that the 49 chapters, similarly like the 49 chapters, the Commander-in-Chief that our Honorable Vice-Chancellor has mentioned, and reading the Red Army, it's got nothing to do with the EFF, I would like to believe. So, Prof, just two issues that I'd just like you to elaborate, because that's just really what it is. The book tells a multitude of stories on resilience, very profoundly so. So I'd like you to comment on, I like the chapter on arresting English. When I looked at it, I had lots of questions on it, but I think you brought about a great sense of humility there in terms of the arresting and the English language being used as a token of power. I'd like you to comment. Dr. Koza, this is for you. I had the privilege of being with your family member, Koza, who was a security personnel here by us, and nobody knew that he was actually a prolific author who wrote books in vernacular, Venda, and English for high school scholars. I had the privilege of being with him. He spoke a lot about you. I learned about you from his words. So thank you very much for that. And then the last one from my side, Prof. Maluleke, is the Bree Street Interpreter. Maybe on a little bit of a serious note, you may say it in a storytelling analogy, but it's a serious situation. I don't think Johannesburg was ready from a risk management, urban risk management point of view. In fact, I think the mayor, both the city manager, Brink, and the premier was actually fortunate, because that area was not cleared out at that time. And should the explosion have continued, we would have had a major disaster, and a mayor, a city manager, and a premier being wiped off. So yeah, I stop there. Thank you very much. By the way, Prof, just program director, I'm so honored to know that the Apple story in selling in Meadowlands bought from Forsberg. We share similar thing that I used to sell newspapers, brought in Sour Street and sell into the market. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so what we are going to do, I'm not going to, maybe we can just have the response during the signing session. Quick question, I saw a hand, is the hand gone? Just very quickly, 1 second, and then please, we need to close. All right, let's get, and then we are done.
Thank you, Program Director. I just wanted to ask Prof, now as a scholar yourself, and me being your student, you advised me to read Achebe and Ingumboye Minyanya for my PhD, and you said to me, you know, Lerato, as much as we scholars can analyze the system and tell you and theorize how the system enacts itself, but when you read fiction, you know exactly what it means to live in that system. That's what fiction does for us. So I want you to read these books for your PhD. So now as an advisor, and I'm working in a university as a lecturer, how would you say, as a black theologian, we can use this book?
I say that conversation continues after. If that is okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we are running behind schedule so much, so please forgive me. We saw the hands that we raised, and we'll be delivering the books to everyone that participated. So without any wasting, oh, even the English is escaping. Without wasting any further time, allow me to please welcome to the stage Professor Basun Zenze, who is the Vice Dean for Internationalization in the Faculty of Humanities at the Great University of Johannesburg, who will be offering closing remarks.
Well, ngiyabonga mphathiselo Tinyiko, Dr. Zondo, and let me take this opportunity to greet both Vice-Chancellors today, including the author, Professor Maluleke, and the distinguished panel from whom we've learned so much, and all of you, our esteemed guests, and to also thank the organizers for the invitation, to the Faculty of Humanities for making us to be mureke for the evening. So my role today is really that of a villain, because I have to bring all of this to a close somehow. If it was up to me, the discussion would go on all evening. There's so much to go through. But more than that, I was given a bit of homework by the UJ Library. They asked me to, as I close, reflect briefly on the significance of memoirs in academic spaces. But I think my job is very easy, because I'll, in a sense, be preaching to the converted. So indeed, over the years, we have seen an upsurge in the publication of academic memoirs. When I looked through my shelves, I could see, for example, Rebels and Rage by Professor Adam Habib. I could see Statues and Storms by Dr. Max Price. I could see Serving Higher Purposes, University Measures in Post-Apartheid South Africa by our very own former Vice-Chancellor, Professor Aaron Rensberg, and so on, and so on. Now, in the case of South Africa, these academic memoirs really showcase the richness of the South African experience and the diversity of our national story. They show the interaction and sometimes occasional disconnect between the state, policymaking, and educational institutions, sometimes for the worst, but sometimes for the best as well, especially when I read G.R. Bozzoli's A Vice-Chancellor Remembers, when he was writing about how Wits University evaded the apartheid system. And so sometimes it is good for universities to be dissenters and to not go along with unethical policy. These memoirs also showcase the challenge of leading through change. They also show us the contested different ideas about the ideal South African universities, but they also help us to locate decisions in their historical context, especially when they are written by our university leaders. They also remind us that leaders are products of history, and that we should perhaps be a little bit kind to our leaders, because they often have to make impossible decisions under very trying circumstances in which they cannot please everybody. They also, however, are sources of inspiration, and I think this evening has shown us precisely this, about how leaders overcome in order to become the people that they are and whom we all can admire. And for South Africa, I often think of South Africa as a nation in desperate need of role models for young people. And so memoirs such as Professor Maluleke's book can be agents for positive change. They are roadmaps for the replication of excellence. And this was a word that came out of a small focus group that I brought together of my postgraduate students to reflect on Professor Maluleke's new book. They told me that his book can serve as a guide for current and future leaders, and that this is essential to the enterprise of human civilization, that they can serve the transference of knowledge and of memory and the accumulation of effort. You do not need to start from scratch if you are a young or a future leader. They also inspire us because this book shows how a young, impoverished, and often hopeless nation can accomplish when hard work meets opportunity. And so I would like to congratulate and to thank Professor Maluleke for indeed a memoir of a special kind, a memoir both about the past but also about hopes for the future, for an excellently written book that is indeed highly readable. Don't be intimidated by its large size. It is a hefty volume, but once you pick it up, you will not be able to put it down. I also want to thank the memoir for shining a light on key episodes and on key individuals who inspire Professor Maluleke and who should inspire all of us Africans, especially the women. I'd like a special round of applause for all the women of South Africa. And so the book shows exceptional attention to detail about the socio-political landscape of South Africa and the educational landscape of South Africa. It's why we as political scientists often claim Professor Maluleke, although technically he is a religious scholar, a theologian. But we very much claim him because more than most and more than anyone, he's able to shine a light on the best and the worst of South Africa, in both political terms and in terms of the state of our higher education landscape. And so congratulations and thank you for this contribution, Professor Maluleke. And I'd also like to thank the Vice-Chancellor of UJ, Professor Mbedi, Dr. Koza, Madam Bikisha, joining us online. And we also thank the publisher, Tracy McDonald Publishing, the Maluleke family, whom I found out today, are also royal in origin, and so we greet you accordingly. And the organizers of this great and successful launch, the University of Johannesburg Library, and my brother from Humanities, Dr. Soon-to-be Professor, Dr. Sfiso Zondo, who, by the way, is a very humble scholar and an accomplished scholar. And on the 29th of May, we will be back here to celebrate him and his new book on performing masculinity. So congratulations. I think let's give him a round of applause. And finally, I'd like to thank all of you, ladies and gentlemen, for being such a wonderful audience. And I would encourage you to buy copies of the book, and let's make it a bestseller on all exclusive books. Thank you very much.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we have come now to the end of the program. Please, once again, let's give a big round of applause to Professor Maluleke. All right, so what we will be doing now, as we say after an event, I don't normally say, Maluleke, bacela sidlule ekhaya siyogeza izandla. So outside, there's something to wash hands with. So during this time, please feel free to engage with Prof. Maluleke, ask questions that you couldn't ask, and get your book signed. And to those that engaged, please, may they come and see me so that we can start dispersing the free copies. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. You've been awesome tonight. Please give yourselves a big round of applause as well. Good evening.